The next question is, what type of questions do we usually ask in qualitative and quantitative research? For qualitative, because it's normally done to gain insight or to gain new ideas, the questions we ask tend to be open-ended because we are exploring, so we are not working in a box. We allow our respondents to supply us with ideas or their thoughts. It allows respondents to think more openly and to be more imaginative. You throw the question to them and they are free to come out with all sorts of ideas. Quantitative research, on the other side, we tend to use close-ended questions because the market characteristics is well known. We have an idea, but we normally do it because we want to be able to make certain strategic decisions based on conclusive research. So a measurement scale, normally known as a Likert or attitude scale, is commonly used, where the scale is there. Various scales, attitude scales are used. Mostly answers are already provided because we have a fair idea of what we are expecting, but we want to be able to do cause-effect relationship. That's why we do quantitative research. The third question we normally want to ask is, what data collection method do we use in qualitative and quantitative research? There are several methods that are used, but the common ones for qualitative research, we do what we call projective techniques. I will explain later. We also may rely on in-depth interviews. We may also use focus group in eliciting qualitative data. For quantitative, we tend to rely on observation. We may do experimentation. We may make use of questionnaire or surveys. Before we explain that, let's look at the fourth question. What sampling methods are used in qualitative and quantitative research? I'm saying that in qualitative research, researchers usually select a small number of respondents from the population for the research exercise. These persons who are selected are usually based on what is convenient for the researcher, since the researcher is only exploring, who also uses his or her personal judgment in the selection process. Qualitative allows for that kind of, allows a lot of freedom in terms of where to get the information from. In other words, who is selected for a qualitative study, who is selected to participate is not known in advance. Here we say that we use non-probability sampling techniques because it's not known in advance. Under quantitative research, on the other hand, large number of respondents are selected to participate in the research. The reason is obvious, because quantitative research is usually used for strategic marketing decisions with long-term consequences. So we normally do the relationship between variables to be able to come up with a more conclusive results. It also allows for generalization of results. In qualitative research, because of the way we collect data, it will not be prudent to want to do a conclusive, a kind of generalization. But a well-administered quantitative study, places a lot of confidence in us as marketers to do a kind of generalization. For instance, you can say that for this brand, 90% are likely to be, we are likely to get 90% of our target market from tertiary students if the method that was used is reliable and valid. Again, in quantitative research, respondents usually have no chance of selection. In other words, probability sampling techniques are used in a typical quantitative research. Again, in terms of analysis, we should be concerned, how is data analyzed for qualitative and quantitative research? Data from under qualitative, respondents are usually analyzed or interpreted by the researcher himself. So it allows for some kind of bias. I mean, the resource is dependent on who is interpreting it. That's how come typically for qualitative research to be useful, we expect that businesses or researchers will use experienced researchers or psychologists, psychoanalysts, or consumer behavior researchers to be able to make meaning because of this freedom to interpret the results. Notwithstanding what we've said, it's more difficult to analyze qualitative research because mostly there are no well-established criteria for doing that, and tends to be subjective, and therefore, like I said, require people with a lot of experience to make meaning of qualitative findings. For quantitative study, results tend to be easy to analyze because a typical study is coded. The study is normally coded and tabulated. So this allows for the responses collected to be entered into a database where we can make use of simple to complex statistical methods for results. In general terms, quantitative study tends to lend itself to easy analysis interpretation because the formulas and parameters for analysis are normally spelled out. Now, there are a number of research tools that can be used under qualitative research. We can talk of projective techniques. This one is based on the assumption that we can't use direct questioning to elicit certain motives, attitudes, feelings, motivations, and drive of consumers in relation to the marketplace. So these projective techniques normally come in the form of disguised form of questioning, often with the respondent not being made aware of the motive for the research. There are various types of projective techniques that are in use. We can talk of the thematic appreciation test. Under this test, the researcher normally will provide the respondent with a scenario and allow the respondent to describe or make meaning out of the scenario given. The researcher may also use what we call the sentence completion test. Though simplistic, it can be very revealing. For instance, the researcher can ask a respondent, what does this product look like? Or those who drive Mercedes, how are they like? You are likely to get very revealing feedback with this kind of questioning because they are in the marketplace, they observe, but some of these thoughts, feelings, attitudes in relation to these brands may be deep-seated, may be hidden into the subconscious. So it's only through this disguised form of questioning that we can gain some of this useful information. Another form of projective techniques that can be used is what we call role-playing. Here, the participants are asked to play the role of someone else. For instance, somebody can be asked, when you are given, you are a father and you have a Land Rover Discovery, tell us how you use it and all that. All these things can generate very insightful feedback. Another form that projective techniques can take is word association. Participants in this, under this condition, will be asked to give the first word that comes to mind immediately after being shown or told a word. So these are some of the types of projective techniques. You may want to read more on projective techniques. The question is, how do we apply projective technique? Although projective techniques present some controversies because of issue of interpretation, who is interpreting will depend on what we get. Mostly because one cannot use it to predict behavior with precision. It can be useful in attitudinal or behavioral or exploratory studies. The methods used need to be carefully chosen and adopted or adapted. The following are examples of applications of projective techniques in research settings. In other words, notwithstanding these challenges with the use of projective techniques, it has some uses or application. One, it can be used to get participants' true opinion on a topic by getting them to comment about something indirectly, thus relieving inhibitions. Once the questioning is not direct, all inhibitions becomes missing. Second point here is that projective techniques can also be used to uncover connotations that people will normally have difficulty to articulate. There are certain connotations with regards to the marketplace. It will be difficult for the participants to articulate. But once the questioning is through indirect form of questionings, some of these connotations can be spilled out freely. Again, projective techniques can be particularly useful for concept testing. You want to test a new concept. You are better off using projective techniques because of the indirect nature and all that, where the participants are free to reveal their attitudes, feelings, emotions, their personality is all revealed through projective techniques. So projective techniques can be particularly useful for concept testing, which is a process used to evaluate product ideas or advertising prototypes prior to their introduction in the marketplace. Notwithstanding this, the importance of projective techniques, it's advised that researchers or marketers use it judiciously because of issues of interpretations and all that. Well, another qualitative tool is the Delft Interview. The only thing I want to say about Delft Interview, again, it also allows for that flexibility of freedom where the researcher can elicit information of interest from the target audience through questioning. Normally, a researcher may want to record this playback, and again, interpretation to here is subjective, but can be very revealing, as in the case of projective techniques for concept development and what have you. And also for promotional strategies, etc., etc. Because here again, the respondents are free, we are able to get very rich information for decision making. But as we've mentioned earlier on, we can't rely on qualitative studies to draw conclusions, and therefore we cannot use it to take major strategic decisions. That requires the deployment of resources, a lot of resources. The third one we can talk about is focus group. For the interviews, it tends to be one-on-one often, but focus group allows for the researcher to select the subject of interest to discuss a particular issue. Normally, it may range from between 6 to 12 people, And because it can be tricky, we expect in using focus group discussion, we need a well-qualified moderator to be able to lead the discussion so that the purpose for which the research is carried out is achieved. And this, here again, audiovisual elements can be used for purposes of recording. Notwithstanding the usefulness of focus group, because it can engender several insights during group discussion, it can, if not well carried out, some participants may feel intimidated and may not be able to, and may allow strong personalities to dominate and so on and so on. So eventually, the purpose may not be achieved. But it's a very useful tool for gaining fresh insights about brands and services and so on. A major disadvantage or challenge or problem of focus group is that data can be misjudged, misleading, or biased by the moderator. In other words, depending on what the moderator may be looking for, since he's free to interpret the data, it can be misleading and all of that, and may cause the organization dearly, notwithstanding the usefulness we've just enumerated. In terms of specific uses, we are saying that focus group methods is often used extensively in new product development. We are developing new product, you want new ideas, advertising development, and brand image studies.